an original.
From Story Studio Network.
Once around the park, James, and don't spare the horses.
I'm not sure why I've added that, but I just...
Bring it on.
Feels right? Here we go. Look at that. The 26th day of May as we record this edition of On the Ledge, your Ontario Politics podcast. Dave Trafford here from Story Studio Network. John Wright from Maru Public Opinion. He may have a thought or two on public opinion as we get through this program. And Keith Leslie, you hear and see him on CH Television out of Hamilton, talking all things Queen's Park. Just a couple of things as we move on. You see, Doors Open this weekend is actually going to let people in to see the governor, the lieutenant governor's chamber at Queen's Park. I think that will be kind of a cool thing.
It's a pretty cool place to see.
Absolutely.
It is. It's a nice two-story apartment within the building, and people don't realize that the lieutenant governor actually lives, in the building. And as there's also a speaker's apartment. But anyway, it's a very cool thing to see. And there's some amazing artwork in it. The whole building is a really cool thing.
It is.
But that LG suite is something else.
And you want to know the treat of it probably is that she'll be there. I mean, she's. I was at a conference. There was a summit put on just recently by G0 Media, Evan Solomon's group, and I had done some polling for them. So it was downtown. And it was about 800 people there, and they had all these speakers. In fact, it finished with the Prime Minister speaking at the end of the day, all hoity-toity with all of these stakeholders. So I walk in the back of the room about mid-morning, and there's this older woman who's just sitting on there's a dais with all of the television cameras at the back, and she's just kind of sitting there with her back to me, and I went, I know that back. And I turned around, and it's Elizabeth Dowdeswell, and she's sitting there just taking it in. At the back, just no front row seat. She wandered in. She's as natural and as nice as anybody's great aunt. I mean, and she's just drinking it all in, learning all about what's going on in the world. So I'll bet you she's there when everybody shows up. She's that kind of a person.
Well, you're dropping in on her.
It's her house, for goodness sake. Yeah.
There
you go. Open door.
So,
class
well,
act.
just on this, and you guys will know, the history as well as anybody. But as you guys are talking about that, and, the lieutenant governors have been in the news to some degree because of things like this, ceremonial, and of course, the passing of David Onley. I don't recall ever having the drama around a lieutenant governor that we have had, it would seem endlessly, around governors general in Ottawa, right?
There really was. The most controversial that I can remember was Hillary Weston.
Right.
And basically because, family connections and whatnot. And, that was the biggest
thing.
and worst they could come up with.
I know.
And that was literally, as they say, a nothing burger. It was just nothing there. She did a fine job as lieutenant governor. As you say, no controversies at all. Whereas on the national stage, the GGs, let's not go there. How's that? We'll just say our lieutenant's governor have been very, very good.
Yeah.
To excellent, Lincoln Alexander. Anyway, won't go into them on David Onley. And that will be interesting to see in the LG suite where the changes made to accommodate David Onley. Because there were several, including in other elevators in the building as well. So it's definitely worth going to see. And as John says, the chances of seeing Madam Dowdeswell there are very strong.
Yeah.
Very high.
So if you're heading out, that might be one of the things you want to do if you're in this part of the world here in Toronto. Doors Open, that'll be one of the many attractions. I just think it's a cool concept, this whole Doors Open thing.
It is, especially the Don Jail, the old Don Jail, if you can go there and see all that.
We did that one.
But you know what? Just on that point, we were reminded this week that the Governor General makes $350,000 a year and pays for wardrobe and all that sort of stuff. And it's kind of like, oh my goodness, that's a lot of money. And she got a $9,000 raise because some index calculates what she's going to get. And you kind of go, well, it's worth it. Well, I don't know. I mean, it's if you go and swing down to the Ontario Ledge, there's no way she makes that much money. David Onley was a good friend of mine because I knew him from university and kept in touch. And I mean, there's two perils that go with that job down at Queen's Park. It doesn't pay enough. I mean, if you've got kids in school and you're still living in your house and you've got your mortgage and you didn't come from any wealth, I mean, the Westons didn't have to complain about it. But if you're just, without a pension and everything else, it's tight. It is. It's tight. Whereas up in Ottawa, it's flush. And so there's a lot more scrutiny on it. But the second thing that I found interesting was once you leave the job, you would think that the lieutenant governor, former, who knows everybody, who's got great respect, would be on maybe a couple of boards, maybe a bank board, maybe this or that. They're not. I mean, the best that they kind of get is maybe, as David did, he went to teach at University of Toronto. And so you can't really make up with that. People don't want to go near you because they don't think they can. So I thought, it's actually where you may go to Ottawa and do a bit of a step up. And, when I was in Ottawa this past week, I'm driving into the city. And of course, out all of a sudden comes, there's no traffic all of a sudden on the other side of the street, on the parkway leading out to the airport. Then there's a motorcycle, then there's a gap, and then there's another one, and then there's another one, and there's another one, and then another one, and then it just goes on and on and on. And then there's this cavalcade of the Governor General with an ambulance behind. Everybody's out going to the airport. And you kind of go, that deserves some scrutiny. But at Queen's Park, it's a totally different world. I mean, it's if you're like the current Lieutenant Governor, I think you can probably do just fine. But if you've got a family of 3 or 4 kids in university and you've had a modest income and stuff like that, it's a bit of a struggle that no one ever talks about. So maybe that's part of it too.
Yeah, I it's funny how we put the demand on certain people in public service, particularly those who put their name on a ballot or sit and represent us in a legislature, and we get really snotty about the money that they get paid. We get miserly about it. And, Keith, when you listen to the lifestyle of an MPP, an MP, a city councillor, whoever, going above and beyond, I don't care what your political posture is, going above and beyond is the expectation. Never mind, there's no 9 to 5 here.
Oh, no, you're now a statesman round the clock. A great example was Lincoln Alexander. Again, someone who did not come from a lot of money, as they say, and whose post-life as a lieutenant governor involved so much public service. I phoned him one time from my Queen's Park office at the Canadian Press, and I guess it come up just as the Ontario government, switchboard, and because Lincoln Alexander answered, I can't remember what I was calling him about, but he answered the phone with, "And what can I do for the Ontario government today?"
The last time I saw him was at a Dave Brubeck concert down at the corner of Queen and University there in
the Opera House.
Yeah, the Opera House.
I was there at that show.
Yeah, and he was coming in and in his wheelchair, and I was with my son, and he's looked at me and said, "Hello, Dave. How are you? And how is Taylor Parnaby?" And this was years after he had retired, right? Mm-hmm. But plugged in. What a gentleman. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Just a class act all the way around.
All right, so let's take it to the other extreme. We've got all of this hyperactivity going on in politics vis-a-vis municipal politics and the province. Last week we had all the drama around the decoupling of Peel being announced, and I still think that to some degree that is what lit the fuse or fire under Bonnie Crombie to move forward. If she was ever going to make a decision, that's what prompted her. I think to some degree, John, this move, it's like Obi-Wan, strike me down, you make me more powerful kind of feel to the whole thing. This was the catalyst for her to say, I want the job in the legislature to lead the party.
Yeah, I guess so. My initial reaction to what the premier did was actually quite opposite. I thought, my political instinct was where they didn't want her in the race, and that what they thought was we can make this happen, and as a result, she'll sit on the sidelines because she'll be too busy being the mayor and everything like that. And so when she came out and was, as feisty as she was, and then she announced that she's going to be exploring and she's going to be in this thing, that did surprise me because it looked like she'd been in the box. And I think the premier's reaction, which I thought was over the top, and drew attention and sort of said he's scared of her, yep. was exactly that. Was, I put you in a box, you should stay in the box, you should be the mayor, and you should look after the people. That cheese has really slid off the cracker on this one. And I thought, man, that was played wrong.
Entirely.
I would have
Entirely.
I would have just said, you know what? The more the merrier. If you want to get into politics, God bless you, and just moved on to the next subject. But he made it a big issue. And I thought she was emboldened by that, because if you know her personality, you know that that's the stuff that makes her want something more. So she's had a history with this premier. She's, as we talked about in the last podcast, she's poked the bear a number of times, and she's not scared. And this is somebody who's given a platform now. I thought his reaction, I don't know how the Liberal Party can walk away from her at any time soon. And I don't know how she's going to be able to walk away from that anytime soon either. So I'd say it's a pretty sure thing that she's, unless there's something lurking in the wings that we don't know about, I think she's got a lock on this, and she'll be there when it's time to be there.
Yeah, I dare say, Keith, that the premier was the one that was poking the bear here.
Holy
Not the other way
cow.
around.
Who in 2023 is going to accuse a woman of having her butt on both sides of the fence?
No kidding.
Not me.
Seriously.
Holy cow. And then he just went on, right? He said, it's all about Bonnie Crombie. She's been running for 5 years. We give her this. She should be looking after the municipality, sitting down, taking care of this. What?
Stay in the home and
Of course.
diaper the kids, for God's sakes,
Yeah,
right?
there's a
knitting.
clock on the stove, for goodness sakes. You don't need to watch. Honest to God, like where this came from. And then he sort of pivoted to bring it on, the more the merrier, okay, let's campaign. But boy, talk about showing your vulnerable throat.
Yep.
Just bearing it there. It was stunning. And as for her, I kind of view it Dave's way, that she's sort of, well, this is splitting up. This is what Hazel and I asked for. Okay, I'm going to declare victory and move on to the provincial level and ride this all the way out.
Well, I'm thinking that she's probably in a really good place. I'd be curious to hear what you guys think. To not even consider finding a seat in the legislature before the next election, right? I mean, there's who among the 8 is going to give up their seat? And
Well, there's no advantage to
what
to
advantage?
being in there.
She can actually sit on the sidelines, unencumbered by the mayor's chair in Mississauga after December, unencumbered by what is actually going on in the legislature at Queen's Park, and laser focused on what's going on in Peel, Mississauga, Brampton, Caledon over the next 18 months. And then starts the campaign to 2026, and here we go. She's got something to run on in a big way. And I heard Steve Clark last week, and I thought, wow, you talk about poking the bear again. When he introduced the legislation, it was in the question period. Mart Stiles that morning says to him something to the effect, how can the people of Brampton, trust you based on the study you did in terms of, looking at the municipality in Peel, and you did all the study, you never released it. His answer back to her was something, well, it's interesting to note that the leader of the opposition failed to comment or note the results of the last election, and all of those seats in 905 are blue. They're government blue, and they're cheering for it. And I thought, are you serious? Here, and then the next thing out of his mouth was, but we want all the municipalities in the province to work together, maturely to get this job done, because it's an important thing to do. I think that, all of a sudden her war room's thinking, okay,
it's
fuck
on.
off.
Yeah, it's totally on.
We're coming for you.
You know what? I thought her interview with Steve Paikin was classically positioned. And the clip that came out of that, everybody had. And look, I go back to the days of, the Bill Davis era, when Keith, you and I and Dave were at the park to witness some of that. This is as she said, look, I'm a fiscal conservative. I'm a socially, progressive liberal. I'm a pragmatic centrist. And it was like, okay, it is on. We're going to take this slice of people who are leaning to the right because they don't like the left, and we're going to plant them back in the middle, and we're going to get the liberals and the soft NDP coming along. Like she's going to be, I'm a pragmatic centrist, and you can trust me because I've got a fiscal record, which you can count on. You can go and look at Mississauga and how I've managed the place. But I've also I'm wearing the red suit like she was, and it ain't Santa Claus. It's for the right reasons. And I'm going to be there against this guy who's, taking money out of education and doing this and, all the stuff that he's doing. And it was just a classic kind of phrase, just a small phrase that she used. But it was the clip, because it was, honey, the middle of the road is back again, and I'm going to manage it. So I meant that's where she's coming from, and I think that's a good place to start.
Well, people are making it something of, her using the phrase right of center. And,
I'm going to govern from the right.
Yeah, she's backed away from that and kind of reiterated the point you've made, John. I did hear her talking to John Moore, I guess it was on Tuesday morning. And she made some comment, Keith, to the effect that I'm going to wait to make sure I meet the criteria. Something like that. What could that possibly mean? Is there something within the party regulate? I don't know. It just seemed a strange choice of words. Now, maybe it was just,
She hasn't raised the money yet. I doubt that.
Or
she hasn't got the signatures.
No, I think she's just
considering
I can't
our
believe
exploratory group. I mean, look at that long. There had to be 35 people on that committee list.
What criteria she's not meeting,
Don't know.
I have no idea what she could be referring to in that. I truly don't. I mean, she would seem to, as you say, we all seem to be viewing her just as outside observers, as someone who can walk in and almost lock up this Liberal leadership race. So what criteria?
No.
Even if there was some obscure rule that she didn't meet, the rule would be changed to make sure she did qualify. I mean, let's be honest, they want her in, I would think.
Yeah, and I begin to think then she was more or less considering from her own perspective whether we've ticked all the boxes internally before we move on. Is she in a place to actually get the mechanisms going to sell the memberships?
Yeah.
So, I mean, outside of 905, I mean, she might be able to sell enough memberships just in 905. But
well, before I get canceled, I was having her call us honey, not me calling her honey, just for the record. You know what? What you get now is very similar approaches to leadership, and that is I'm going on a listening tour. Mm-hmm. And so as I said in the last podcast, it'll be interesting to see her in Kenora. It'll be interesting to see the reaction in Moose Bay or someplace up, or Moose Factory or wherever. So she's going to get out of her urban kind of place and she's going to be among the population. But she has, I think rightly, when she goes, I would have advised the same thing. Put some doubt into it. Maybe I don't meet the criteria. I want to listen to people. I don't have all the answers. I may be a mayor and I may be a longtime Liberal, but I need to be out and learn over the next many, many months what really matters to people. Okay, well, Tim Hudak, hello. Patrick Brown, hello. I mean, Dalton McGuinty, not so much, but others have gone in that direction, and that's what they'll do. So I think she's in a good spot to do that, Dave. And I think, of course, you end up with 30-odd people supporting you. I'm surprised it's not 130 people who would have been on that list. But those... Well,
it was a long weekend, John.
Yeah, sorry. It was just like, man, and it came up on the website so quick, right? And then it was down. Thank God Sabrina was around to catch it. But it just strikes me that those people will be out selling her memberships. It's going to be 130 people who go, she's the one. I'm out. I want this riding. I'm going to sell it. My future is even being staked on that. You're going to get candidates coming out of the woodwork for her.
There's also there's a huge Liberal base, as we know, but a base that's there to be tapped. And the best sign of it, the best significant tangible sign I can see of how strong the Liberals are in Ontario is the per vote subsidies are coming out this week. The Liberals will be getting more than the NDP, the official opposition.
Well, but what?
That's based on the
How many parties, Keith, do you know that can sit at 28% in the polls without having anybody for leader and having 7 people in the legislature? I mean, that's the level base, right? It's not like you're Jagmeet Singh and you're sitting at 15 and hoping for 20 in the election campaign. These guys are at 28. You need 37 for an election. She's formidable going in with nothing organized.
Absolutely. That's my point. I think that Liberals are there to come back to be at least a viable opposition, and even to take on a two-term Ford government. They're absolutely going to be vulnerable. They already are. If a strong Liberal leader, and she seems to be strong. So the fact they have that much money, the votes, they got that many votes in 2022. They just didn't get them in the right places, as we know. But there is a massive, strong Liberal base. The candidates are going to have an easy time selling Liberal memberships, I think. I don't know if they'll get into Patrick Brown territory, but they'll get into some significant numbers. And that's, exactly what this party needs. And as John says, as she approaches it with I need to learn and I need to understand all the different regions of Ontario. I'm from a city of 800,000, it's a different thing. that's a very workable strategy, and having the money behind you to do it is the most important factor.
If I only had one piece of advice for Bonnie Crombie, it would be this. Take a look at how Bill Davis talked to people after he got elected and Norman Atkins took over from the campaign and said, you know what? Everybody thinks you're kind of too serious, so, doff the suit, grab the pipe, talk about Brampton Billy and your home roots and stuff like that. I think Bonnie Crombie, who a lot of people don't know, is seen as a force to be reckoned with. I'd be a bit self-deprecating, and I'd make some fun of the other people. Like, I wouldn't take the premier on as much. I would probably just, kind of say, hey, remember Ronald Reagan? And it was kind of like, there he goes again. It's one of those kind of off the shoulder saying, well, I'm here and he is too, but I'm going to have some fun with this. I think that's the only piece I'd have. Go and have some fun. Do the barbecue circuit this summer and make some jokes, but ignore the guy behind the drapes. Don't forget about that. Just move on.
I'd be curious to see whether or not Bonnie Crombie, whether she's declared or not, shows up for the campaigning in Scarborough to fill Mitzi Hunter's seat, because Gary Crawford has already been appointed as the Conservative candidate there. Again, it's a little bit of suck and blow going on here, because the premier complaining about Crombie, running for the leadership while being mayor, but it's okay for Gary Crawford to be the budget chief in Toronto while running for an MPP position at Queen's Park.
But she's going to have pressure wherever there is an opening, right? Mm-hmm. The premier and others are going to say, so he's scared to get into the race and represent blah, blah, blah. But her fallback is, look, you created the mess in Mississauga, not me. I got to stick around. I got work to do, buddy. I'm going to roll up my sleeves. I'll have my constituency here. And plus, I want to go out and listen, so bug off. I think that's her fallback. I'm not going to take time. You created this whole mess. I'm going to serve my province and the Liberal Party when time is right, but right now I'm still rolled up my sleeves. Go to the cottage, buddy. Have a great weekend, but I got work to do. I think that's the perfect out for her every single time.
Yeah, well, but at the same time, where I think they've lit a fire under the Liberals vis-a-vis the reaction to Crombie, I think that the fight in Scarborough for Mitzi Hunter's seat, Keith, is going to be a little bit more heated than we otherwise would have thought.
I believe so. I think you're right on this. The Conservatives are obviously taking it very seriously. It's going to be interesting to see, exactly when Doug Ford calls his by-election. The timing will, of course, be crucial. But the Conservatives are coming on strong. They feel that they've always, the Ford family in particular has always sort of spoken up for Scarborough when others didn't. That's their party brand. That's what they always say. And I think people in Scarborough believe there's some truth to it. So. What did Mitzi and the Liberals deliver there? She claims something about the subway. I just am confused by everything that happened in the subway in Scarborough. So absolutely, there's a chance for the Conservatives to make take another Red Riding away. But I think the Conservatives as well are having their own issues elsewhere. Like this Minden emergency room being closed down. That's Laurie Scott's writing. This is such a safe Conservative writing, and people are pissed. They are, and they're blaming this government. Even though this government's claiming, we're hands off. We don't make those decisions. It's a local hospital board. Horseshit. They wouldn't be closing an ER if you didn't allow them to, or if you were funding them properly. So let's deal with that. So I see these by-elections as teeing up, but I think the Conservatives, while their strengths, they're looking in some vulnerabilities of the Liberals in one area, they're creating their own vulnerabilities in other areas. Mm-hmm.
Doug Ford not on the podium last night for the Toronto Region Board of Trade TVO debate at U of T, but was certainly, there could have been a drinking game the number of times that the Premier's name was evoked. And it's interesting to see how that is playing into some of the politics around this. As I was in the theater last night, and I thought, based on the evolution from the first debate at Daily Bread, there have been 3 or 4 others that I'm kind of dipped into and watched, but to be in the room live, a little different. John, it was interesting to me to look at the demographic in that room. I would say that the average age was 40 plus, that more women than men. and not nearly as diverse a crowd as what we saw on the stage in terms of the candidates. And here we are. We're in downtown, the heart of downtown Toronto, right at the University of Toronto campus. And so I would have thought, this is going to be an interesting dynamic to see how that demographic in the room is responding to what's being said. Anecdotally, almost an equal amount of groaning and laughing and supportive, mild, quiet clapping, because Steve sort of laid the down the ground rules. We can't be interrupting the show for a lot of noise in the room. But you could hear the buzz in the room when you were in the room. There was no champion on that stage for that audience. They were very diverse in their own particular points of view or their interests. The number of times around me I heard people groaning when a candidate like Matlow was taking a shot at Saunders over his record as police chief. Like, people were thinking, ooh, that's bad. You just can't be doing that to poor Mark Saunders, was the feel in the room. So it's really curious to see how some of this doesn't, to me, at all reflect these huge gaps in the polls. I mean, I find it really hard to believe that Olivia Chow was going to lead and win wire to wire.
Let me channel my Tim Powers to this podcast. Dave, it's so good to know that you have so many people showing up that are just not, they're independent. They're not forced to be there by any political party and take a stand by anybody. I mean, there's no pack in a room in Toronto for any of these municipal election debates, all 103 of them, are there? I mean, for goodness sake. There are going to be 100 of these things. We have 3 or 4 in a day. Forget the fatigue of everybody. I can't imagine being a candidate. That in itself would scare me away forever running for that office. Oh my God. Secondly, it's one debate. The other culprit in all of this is the public opinion polls, which seem to be determining who even gets on the damn stage. And there's lots of methodology issues with all of that that's going on. But I don't think it's penetrating anywhere. I think this is just a mug's game with a group of politicos who, like you and me, follow this stuff. I think for, Mr. and Mrs. Front Porch, I don't think they're tuned into this at the moment. I know that there's name recognition that's driving this, but I don't see... Maybe I'm just in the wrong circles. I've got Facebook and I've got Twitter that I look at and stuff like that, and I see some stuff, but I don't see it anywhere else. Josh Matlow actually gave my house a Robo call, and the only reason it went off was because Bell Canada, when I switched over recently to them, gave me a landline for free. They actually said you can have the landline for free, and what you can do is you have unlimited North American long-distance calls. Okay, well, I can call my relatives in some place and not get charged for it. But guess what? I'm sitting there working away at the dining room table the other day at my laptop, and I actually had to go to Value Village and get one of those old machines where you can walk around. Remember? It's the Panasonic ones. And so it's got a tape machine, not a tape machine, but it's got one of these things where you call and you can leave a message and you can hear it. And sure enough, right in the middle of the afternoon, hi, I'm Josh Matlow and I'm running for mayor. I hadn't heard anything like, so it's a landline that did it. But I don't get a sense that there's an election on in this city. Like, there's a lot of buzz and but I don't feel it on the ground. And where I get the insight is from my local dog park, where I go and I listen to people. And what I get there is, I wish there was someone else running than these clowns. That's what I get. I wish that McKelvey, the deputy mayor, were running. She seems to be the adult in the room, and she's not going to run, at all. So I really, as someone who's seen this for years, Dave, I appreciate the fact you were in the room. My wife was in the room the previous night and saw it as well and came away with great impressions. But it's kind of like, call me a week before the election. Let me see where the campaigns have all unloaded, because I don't really think right now any of this stuff matters. But anyways, but I value your opinion, and the reason is because you're the one talking about it and people listen to you, and I think that's going to sway people.
Well, what was clear to me was, people paid, like it was a paid ticket to get into the Board of Trade show last night. And it was like $20 or something, so it wasn't overly difficult. But there was a level of engagement there. So people who are putting money down to show up at an event into the evening, they're going to vote. There's no question about it. So they're engaged, and that's what struck me about it. But just before Keith weighs in on this, you said that the pollsters are driving who gets on the stage. If you were an organizer of a debate, how would you decide who should be sitting on the podium?
I had a call from a very significant person in the network. This was a few weeks ago, and he called for my advice, but it turned out to be a bit of a one-sided argument. It wasn't me arguing, but it ended up being a justification for going by the polls. And I said, look, if it's all very subjective. If a pollster wants to put on 4 names, then that's who's going to be on your list. But we got 107, is it, or something like that? And if you're going to say it's the top 10, well, then you're going to get 10 on the list. Well, now it's 8 or whatever. But you got a few things going on here. Number one, it's very subjective. So for the longest time, Anthony Furey was not on that list. And I'm saying that I'm not an Anthony Furey committed person, and I have nothing to do with any of these campaigns. But I mean, he's been out there. He's got some, former Sun columnist. He's got some presence and stuff like that. And he's not showing up on anything. Main Street's poll out this morning suddenly has him on it. And he's got 9%. And in order to get on the podium at the Board of Trade, you have to have 10. And if you factor in a margin of error on 400 people who are polled, 400 people on a poll, that's a margin of error of 6 points. So he might as well be sitting at 15 as far as I'm concerned. So there's a whole issue here of who's making the call to put him on. And they say, there's the criteria. And that was the argument. And I said, wait a second. You got to do a quadrant. I mean, you got to look at the issues and sort of say, well, how much is the polling worth? Even if it's a third, there's that. But there's other criteria. What do they contribute? What are the new ideas? Because what we're ending up with is has-beens. And I'm not against experience, but I mean, there's no choice here of old, there's no new ideas here. Day after day, I can tell you, it's about the TTC. It's about housing affordability. It's about a couple of other things. I got no new ideas to work with. It's like same old stuff. So I guess the problem I have with all of this is, one, we've allowed polls, 3 of them actually, who do Robo calls. There's nothing wrong with methodologies, I guess, but they are the ones who can do it because it's cheap and no one's paying for this thing. And Angus Reid always said, unless the media's got some skin in the game, they don't give a shit. So charge them $5,000. Gary Slate paid me $5,000 per election, and that's saying something right there. So, but the second thing is that we have a system of polling where there's no consortium. So the first argument was the poll's going to do this. And I said, well, maybe you have 2 nights or you have 6 and 6 and do, oh no, we can't do that because of revenue. We can't do 2 nights. Okay. And then I thought, if we had a consortium of the media who paid a minimum amount of money, there's a way in which you can do this without having percentages. You could actually have people have a vote, and you do it with what are the numbers? I could go through a formula here, but it's based on votes. So if I do a 2,000 sample, I can have people say, have you heard, read, or seen anything about these people? Do you recognize them? And if they say yes, they get to vote. But I take out the percentages and I just run it on how many people actually tally to vote. And then I can weight it and I can say, maybe if you are, you could say that I very much likely want to vote for this person, somewhat, not very much, not likely at all. I can give 100 points for the first one if you say very much. I can give somewhat 70 points. I can give 30 to not very much, and then 0 to not at all. And I add up those points. And so there's no margin of error, and you end up with a ranked system. And you can put 20 names on it if all you want. But it takes some imagination rather than every robocall every third day to look at the consistency. There isn't any. Up, down, here, there. You tell me how Anna Bilau, inside of 2 weeks in this city, has gone from nowhere to somewhere. Come on, 15 points in a spread now in like nowhere's time. Tell me what's driving her numbers. And
well, I think this is just a measure of name recognition. Period. It's not about who is.
No, but even in that,
rich.
But
period.
Yeah.
I mean, so the more media talks about the polls, they hear Anna Bilau's name coming up. This is for the campaigns themselves. It becomes a mechanism for earned media. I mean, quite literally.
Well, and that's why. And I could say in this city there was a lobbying effort. And I had some sympathy for it, saying to me, you should be out there because you've got no skin in the game. You've done polling for a while. People will listen for you. Could you do an op-ed and sort of say this is democracy and, and it's worse and the pollsters. Mm-hmm. Well, you know what? I actually agree with them. I think this is really laziness. And I
Entirely.
and I think
Yes.
it deserves
On so many levels.
And as a resident of the city, they're now talking about 6% increases in tax. In fact, they came up yesterday. Olivia Chestnut talking about an income frickin' tax. I mean, it's not just property tax. We're talking about people who can afford things, and maybe we should do the test. We're not talking about that stuff. What are we talking about? Safety on the TTC, for Christ's sake. I mean, we got to get some new ideas into this, and nobody's taken on the federal or provincial government. The only one left there is some lone voice of the deputy mayor saying, hey guys, we need some help. Nobody else on that podium's taken anybody on because they're scared that they're going to, put their foot in it and get people who don't want to vote for them, or, the premier's going to tag people and say, don't vote for that person. But boy, oh boy, it's not the issues that people are wanting to hear about.
Well,
not all of them anyways.
On the other hand, though, Keith, in terms of what people don't want to hear about, they don't want to hear that the horizon is kind of scary.
No.
We're looking at $1.5 billion hole in the City of Toronto's annual budget, a $46 billion pressure over 10 years, and there is no way that anybody on that stage was prepared to address that in a meaningful way. That's going to mean some really hard choices in the next 8 to 10 months, never mind 8 to 10 years.
Well, this is why I have trouble, as you do, believing that Olivia Chow can lead this wire to wire when she refuses to even say how much she wants to raise taxes. And as John said, talking about an income tax as well. Hard choices are coming. We've got over half those candidates saying those hard choices absolutely involve tax increases above the rate of inflation. What are they going to spend this on? How are they going to make this better? How does that get to the $1 billion, or as you say, in a couple of years, it's $1.5 billion shortfall annually? It does take a whole new level of relationship with the provincial and federal governments. Or does it take, maybe Ballow is onto something with this, trying to get the province. I know they say they won't do it, but it's a valid point that the Gardiner and the Don Valley should be provincial, should be run by the province, should be paid for by the province. That's a lot of money right there sitting on the table. I know that's an easy one, but it's at least a tangible idea from someone. But to the point of addressing this flat up, we're going to increase your taxes and we're going to do it. Basically, they said they were going to do it to address homelessness and to address the housing crisis, build more rental and affordable housing. Really? I think the priorities have moved on from that. First of all, we got to get the finances in order. And we have to get, again, to the safety issues and the TTC. But we need some clear plans. Mitzi Hunter, to her credit, had put out a fully detailed and costed plan. Tax, she's talking about tax increase, but at least she's moderating it to some degree, of just slightly above inflation. It's going to take, as you say, adults in the room. And the 6 people on stage last night were much more interested in pointing to their past histories about each. You didn't do this, you failed to do that, you were weak at this. And that's not certainly what a paying audience wanted to hear. They wanted to hear new ideas. Same with the rest of us. We want to hear some new ideas, and we're not hearing anything remotely in the way of
Well, a
new
dose
ideas.
of reality, though. Listen, folks, we're going to be in for a shit show. You think it's bad now?
Yeah.
We really have to brace ourselves for a difficult next 5 years. Whoever's the mayor over the next 3 years may only be a one-term mayor. I mean, if in fact the mayor addresses everything that needs to be addressed, they're not going to be popular, but they're going to have to do some really hard things to get the city back on track.
Well, they need to do some
inflation
basic
or just
things.
above inflation in tax increase is not going to get us close to covering off that $1 billion. There's just not.
No, services will have to be cut, but other ones are going to have to be prioritized. And I suggest that being getting the city clean again, getting the basic garbage, all that sort of stuff that's all over the downtown streets. You've got CTV doing a 2-part series on how disgusting and dirty downtown Toronto is.
Yeah.
That's not the normal media story about Toronto, is it?
Well, and also
This is where we've evolved to, and this is the reality. And CTV is not some, small town station. This is serious network, double 2-night airtime on how bad the city has deteriorated in the core.
Well, you know what?
Serious.
And the other part of this point is that we don't have a return to the core. I mean, the city's going to hollow out into people on social services, old people, and hospitals. I mean, the corporations, there's 40% still less foot traffic than there was before. We still have hybrid, and it's not going to be solved by a bunch of banks saying, you got to be in the office 4 days a week. I mean, I was just, as I said, I was in Ottawa this week. You want to see what the Spark Street Mall looks like. 70% of the stores on the Spark Street Mall are papered up. There's nobody downtown. The civil servants are now permanently at home. Might as well just write it off. And what it does is it creates a lack of revenue, so they can't do the things to make it look better, and nobody wants to go there. It's a terrible circumstance. I think from a leverage point of view, the federal and provincial governments don't want to hand any money over to anybody until somebody's a mayor. Like, you just don't want to do that. But okay, so that's fine. But God knows, I wonder where the finance minister's writing is. I mean, honestly, you got the finance minister of the country and Tony Rosedale, who hasn't said a peep about anything to do with the deficit. I hope at the end of the day, whether it's Chow or somebody else who leaves, as elected mayor, somebody frickin' ponies up.
Well, it again, there's a really difficult conversation that has to be had here, and again, more than a mature conversation with the people who live in this city and this region, because as goes Toronto, goes the rest of the province and the rest of the country at this stage. I mean, you're going to feel the ripple out where you are, Keith, if all of a sudden Toronto's in a spiral.
Oh, no, Toronto's economy, it takes everything down with it. Absolutely. It's just the way that Canada works. And the rest of Canadians know it too. Let's just face reality. So this city needs some serious management, fiscal management. And as you say, tough decisions. Some services are going to have to be cut. And they're debating about whether they can open up contracting out of city contracts. And oh my God, isn't this debate? Didn't I hear that debate in like 1993?
Well, they're still debating the Gardiner and what they're going to do with it, and based on a decision from 2015. Yeah. And, God bless him, but, Josh Matlow keeps banging that drum. We're just going to knock it down and put it at grade. And I don't want to get into the details, but he tends to think that this is going to save money. This has gone through council I don't know how many times, and the motion that he puts forward keeps getting defeated. Now, here's the guy who says, I'm not going to use strong mayor powers. The only way he could get that done is with strong mayor powers. So the bullshit off the side of your desk kind of shiny thing over there is not dealing with the harsh reality of what this city is facing. You know what? We need more 3Ps, like that Metrolinx thing, right? We need more. Oh my God. Oh, Jesus.
Well, seriously, the TTC and those two highways are billions of dollars that should be being funded. Yep. No other transit system runs without other levels of government funding. None, anywhere. This is ridiculous. Those basic core things, but it's going to take literally a strong mayor with more than strong mayor powers to convince the province that this needs to be done annually. Otherwise, you're going to face this annually, and it's only going to get worse for a city that's legally not allowed to run a deficit. So how's that going to work?
Yeah. And again, all this will kick in, but we'll just kind of recap the way this conversation has gone.
In stage one, we say nothing is going to happen.
Stage two, we say something may be going to happen, but we should do nothing about it.
In stage three, we say that maybe we should do something about it, but there's nothing we can do.
Stage four, we say maybe there was something we could have done, but it's too late now.
We've tried nothing, and we're all out of ideas.
There you go.
And that was about the foreign policy debate. But Sir Humphrey, when he talks about polls, that is a classic. You got to listen to that one.
Yes, Minister. Guys, listen, have a good weekend. It's always good to talk to you. Keith Leslie, John Wright, I'm Dave Trafford, and this is On the Ledge, your Ontario politics podcast for Story Studio Network.
This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.